former Taiwan President Li Yi-Zhong has remarked in an interview with a cable station that had never been advocate Taiwanese independence, because Taiwan is already an independent country. Taiwan owns its sovereignty. How can we go back and pursue independence? Li said. He pointed out at the same time that instead of being trapped in a conflict between pro-independence and pro-unification camps, one should care more about the livelihoods of the public, trying to solve real problems. Taiwan Solidarity Union Chairman Huang Kunhui announced earlier that TSU would adopt a left-middle or more moderate approach, and that the party may change its name to reflect its goal of social democracy. Has Li really changed his stance on Taiwanese independence? This is a question yet to be answered. However, Li did emphasize in the same interview with the cable station that he was in favor of allowing Chinese investors to invest in Taiwan, and that he would welcome opening Taiwan to Chinese tourists to correct Taiwan's overdependence on China's economy. If given the opportunity, Li would also like to visit China. With the moderate shift of Li's political stance and the mild change of direction of the TSU, the DPP was suddenly left alone in the fight for the support of deep green voters. Given the fact that the support of deep green voters alone could not guarantee their staying in power, the DPP would be inevitably forced to re-examine their political stance and to try to appeal to a wider range of voters. Furthermore, after Li's seemingly open gestures to China, cross-strait relations will certainly be brought to the center stage again. With the new messages sent out by Li, the DPP's position on cross-strait relations seems to become much more important than ever.
Welcome to this week's edition of Taiwan Outlook. I'm your host, Chi-Chen Lo. In today's program, we'll be discussing Taiwan's ruling party, Democratic Progressive Party's China policy and the prospect for cross-strait relations. To join us today is the Director of the Chinese Affairs Department of the DPP, Dr. Lai Yi-Zhong. Dr. Lai, welcome to our program.
Yeah, thank you, Zhizhen, and it's my pleasure too.
Your party has been in power for more than 6 years, and someone blamed your party for the current political stalemate in the Taiwan Strait. How do you respond to this kind of criticism?
I believe that if you look at the current political situation across the Taiwan Strait, apparently there's no political dialogue between Taiwan and China, especially about the government. And people usually ascribe that as the ruling party DPP's fault for not responding to the Chinese. But the issue is but the truth is that DPP already made several goodwill gestures, and if you look back for the past 6 years, President Chen Shui-bian, during his first and second year, continuously to give the good gesture to China, and offering all kinds of the formula that he hopes that the current stalemate can be settled. Issues like political integrations and the future one China, and all those kind of statements in order to pacify China. But in the end, it is China who took away Taiwan's diplomatic ally right at the same day when President Chen assumed the DPP leadership. So that the goodwill gesture did not get what Chinese reciprocity from China. And China continued to use the blackmail as well as a threatening tactic against Taiwan, no matter who is in power. And also the current DPP or the CCP political dialogue, and China still set up all kinds of conditions, including that the Taiwan government had to accept the One China principles, and also what they call it as a 1992 consensus, in which they ascribe it as the 1992 consensus. Both sides agree there's only one China and Taiwan is a part of it. So as a precondition. So that by setting all those things in advance for the political talk between Taiwan and China, I believe it is CCP who is setting all the roadblock for the cross-strait dialogue.
But speaking of one China, does your party have any compromising positions on this one China principle or one China policy?
I believe that if you look at the we look at the one China, the fundamental issue is actually not about one China. It is the issue about what Taiwan's status within this one China. And by looking at the democracy in Taiwan, what we discover, especially in the last 6 or 7 years, is that the super consensus in Taiwan is that Taiwan is already an independent sovereign state. The name is called Republic of China. That's our current country name. And also the future of Taiwan should be determined by the 23 million people in Taiwan. So if you combine those two things together, the status quo, as the majority Taiwanese people believe, is that we are already independent. Thus, we don't need to declare independence. But since we are already independent, so that the notion about Taiwan as a part of China, the majority of the people will reject it. And second of all is that the future of Taiwan should be determined by the Taiwanese people. And that is a principle of democratic self-determination. So for any government, I believe for any party or any government, if that party or government is responsible, accountable to the people of Taiwan, then we should respect the so-called democratic self-determination. And everything about one China or two China, whatever the formula, without the consent of the Taiwanese people, the government or the ruling or the party in power cannot execute it. So that the issue about the DPP on the one China is that, well, one China definitely can be discussed. But whether the people here will accept the one China, we have to go to the people and ask them if they want to accept. Another thing is that the PRC's one China continue to regard Taiwan as a part of China. And there's only one China in the whole world. And then if we go to the extent internationally, when we look at that this one China formula, automatically that means the elimination of Taiwan's international participation. Because right now the consensus in the whole world is that PRC is the legitimate government of this one China. If we agree that Taiwan is a part of this China, then we'll be the subjugating to the Beijing government's rule. And I believe nobody in Taiwan, no person in Taiwan would like to accept that position, except with a very little number of the people who advocate for the unification.
But at some point in time, Taiwan seemed to accept the so-called one China position, especially when the KMT was in power. And it was the DPP, your party, that has been deviating from the previous positions on the one China. Is that a fair statement to say that your party is deviating from the previous policy positions taken by the previous government?
I will say that it is not that our party is deviating from the previous government's position, but whether the party itself, the ruling party, will be able to abide by the majority people in Taiwan. I think that's the fundamental principles. When in 1992, yes, there was an agreement struck between the KMT when the party was in power and the CCP on the issue about the one China issues. And when we look at this, and the problem until today is that both sides, whether KMT and the CCP, since they agree there's a one China, but I believe that the content of this one China, that both sides probably have a very different perception about it. And the KMT came back to Taiwan and tell the people in Taiwan that the agreement they are able to strike in 1992 with the CCP is the so-called one China different interpretations. And this notion has been continually rejected by the Communist Party from 1993 all the way onward to 1999 and year 2000 officially. So that when the KMT continued to tell the people in Taiwan, look, the cross-strait relations is hinged upon the agreement on the 1992 consensus, which is about the one China. And KMT's version is the consensus is called one China different interpretation. But when the DPP government is in power, when we look at the whole things, we found out that the PRC never agree with it. So that if the notion about one China, the both sides has different perception and a different perception about the contents, how could we call that as a consensus? All right. So that the DPP parties first found out that KMT's version about the management of the cross-strait issue in 1992, based on 1992 consensus and the issue about one China, that cannot work. Because PRC never accepted KMT's
but as we know that in the very beginning that PRC rejected the notion of 92 consensus, but in recent years, the CCP picked up the idea of 92 consensus and tried to sell it to Taiwan. Why can your party accept this kind of ambiguity proposed by the PRC. Is there ambiguity over there?
I don't think there's ambiguity over there, at least in China. Because we look at Hu Jintao, the CCP chairman, and in his various statements, he clearly stated that the 1992 consensus is that both sides agree there's only one China principle.
Period?
And Taiwan is a part of it, all right? That's it. And there is no room for the so-called one China different interpretations, as KMT stated. And the KMT continued to try to pitch to the Taiwanese people that 1992 consensus based on one China different interpretation that can work. But we look at the Lian Zhan and Hu Jintao statement, as well as James Song and the Hu Jintao statement in 2005, as well as the last year when Hu Jintao was in Washington D.C. and he also stated about the content about the one China, the so-called 92 consensus. It is still on the very firm stance about the one China principle. It is very different from the one China different interpretation that KMT continued to say that. So that I will say that the CCP has never softened its stance. Probably it used a different language, but its basic position has never been changed. And if KMT believe that this is the formula that can work out for the cross-strait relationship, I'll say that they were wrong in 1992, and that resulted in a disaster in the cross-strait relationship in the 90s, and also resulted in the 1996 the military standoff. And now they want to pitch to the people in Taiwan to believing this can work. I'll say that is not going to change.
But as we know that something did happen in 1992, which led to some sort of agreement or talks between the two sides. From your understanding, what happened in 1992? What kind of consensus or agreements reached between the two sides at that time, the CCP and the ruling KMT?
I believe that, yes, there are agreements that both sides are able to strike at that time. And probably the terminology and the content, it is still disputable, whether that based on what kind of the presumptions. But at least what we found out is that based on there's all kinds of talk on what happened in 1992 in Hong Kong, and especially on the resolution about the functional issues. That is an issue with no political connotations. That was able to work out, and eventually both sides were able to talk in 1993. And we never rejected such fact has existed. But the problem is that if the KMT continue to believe that the way that the both sides are able to talk in 1993 is precisely because in 1992 they have the reach on the formula of the one country different interpretation. That's called 92 consensus. We said that since the PRC rejected it, that's not going to work. But we never rejected the notion that 1992 is something that did happen, and we are willing to accept that. And also, I think another very important reality we have to consider is that in today's Taiwan, the Taiwanese people, would they be able to accept the so-called Taiwan is a part of China? All right, this is the very core in the one China issues. Whether they are going to accept the one Taiwan is a part of China. We look at various opinions poll on either from the Mainland Affairs Council or other polls done by several think tanks. Continuously, we have about 80 to 85% of the people in Taiwan rejected the notion that Taiwan is a part of China. All right, so when we have the majority people here, they rejected this notion, then how could this also one China be able to accept socially in Taiwan? Then for any party, if they come to the power and continue to force on to lay down their China policy based on this so-called 1992 issue, whatever, and that is not going to meet in today's reality in Taiwan, and that has been rejected by the Communist Party during the 90s. So I don't think that's going to work.
But we'll talk about other parties' position on this issue later. But from my reading of what you just said, is that correct to say that there's no way that for your party and the CCP to resolve the political issues between the two sides?
I believe that the DPP already made our proposal up in front, that we are willing to talk. And especially last year, I think in April, from March all the way to April, the DPP chairman, Yu Xikun, publicly said 3 to 4 times that he is willing to have a dialogue with Chinese leadership, with Hu Jintao, and any place, anywhere, anytime, and on the issue about everything. All right.
So no preconditions at all?
No, basically for us, that is, it is China who set up all the preconditions. They want DPP to change the constitution of itself, because they believe in 1992 DP Constitution there is a so-called Taiwan independence programming in that Constitution, and they want DPP to change. And also they demand DPP to accept the One China principles. But for DPP, our position is that we're willing to negotiate, we're willing to talk about anything, and we do not demand any preconditions. So right now the stalemate is actually resulting from China because they demand all kinds of preconditions before they wanted to consider to talk with DPP.
Will you insist that China should renounce the use of force against Taiwan before you can engage talks with the PRC?
I think those are different issues, in my view at least. Of course, we can there is still discussion within the DPP whether China should renounce the use of force first as a precondition for the talk. But my belief is that it is precisely since we are having the danger of the military standoff, so that the negotiation and political dialogue is more important than ever. Then if the dialogue is able to somewhat to reduce the likelihood for the military conflicts, then set out a precondition like those probably will be counterproductive. But that is my view.
Will you be saying that China now is waiting your party to leave the office and then talk to the opposition parties?
I believe that the Chinese current tactic about divide and conquer, I would say, they talk to all the way to the opposition party, but refuse to engage with the ruling party, and also trying in everything without considering the economic market logic, trying to go to the grassroots of the DPP's traditional supporters and cultivate them. Yes, it is the act of the very unfriendly. But in our view, is still that China, no matter what the Communist Party was doing, but DPP is standing on the position about Taiwan, that what is the best for the Taiwan, what is best interest for the Taiwanese people. And we still believe, despite whatever the Communist Party is doing, that on the defense side, we have to strengthen our defense and expenditure, modernization of the military. But on the diplomatic side, that we are still seeking opportunities. We do not close the door about the dialogue with China. And economically, we also believe that the Chinese economic conditions is both an opportunity but also a risk that we have to manage.
But what are the costs or the effects of this current relationship without political dialogues between the two sides?
There are a lot of things. For example, since China already put the political dialogue and put a lot of things in the dialogue into the political context. So the issue like the economic crimes issues, that recently, I believe in January, there's a big commemorate in Taiwan that he sort of hollowing out a lot of the stockholders' money, and then defected all the way to China, and then China, despite all the plea by the Taiwan government and also by our party, refused to cooperate about these issues, and then sort of privately told this person to go to other country, and then that person eventually ended up in the third country. And this act actually is not helpful for the cross-strait, I think, not only for the Taiwan businessmen and also Taiwanese people about their money not being able to retract back, but also for China, since China right now is in the work of the trying to fight their similar anti-corruption campaign. And when we look at the cross-strait issues, it is not just the money laundering from Taiwan to China, but also the money laundering from China to Taiwan. So that if it is going to be the beneficial for both people and across the Taiwan Strait, then issues like those, the economic crimes and the money laundering and all those, the commitment for the cooperation to fight against crime, those are very important. But the sad thing is that since China put a lot of these things into the political context, so that when they talk about the anti-crime, the cooperations, they probably would like to do something about the crime that is involved in the physical harms. But how about economic crimes, the intellectual theft? They are not doing anything about it.
Despite the political statement between the two sides, there have been a lot of interactions across the Taiwan Strait. When we come back, we will talk about economic trade and social exchanges between the two sides. Let's take a short break. Stay with us.